Imagine this. You find yourself in a vast crowd, thousands of faces moving as one, each step syncing with the collective rhythm of the masses. The air vibrates with a strange energy, a pulse you cannot resist. Around you, voices echo the same opinions, the same fears, the same hopes. The crowd surges forward, and you surge with it, carried by an invisible current. But suddenly, a chilling thought pierces through the din. What if you don't know where this crowd is headed? What if this mass movement is not toward freedom or truth, but deeper into a fog of confusion and blind obedience? You glance around. Everyone seems so sure, so certain that this is the path to take, that this belief is the right one, that this enemy is the one to hate. Yet, within you, a gnawing doubt stirs. You feel it quietly growing, a flicker of something forbidden, the urge to stop, to question, to break away. But the crowd presses in, their eyes demanding conformity, their murmurs warning of isolation if you stray. The paradox is brutal and suffocating. You crave freedom but are shackled by the invisible chains of collective thought. You want to think for yourself, but your own voice feels small, faint against the roar of the many. How did we come to live like this, trapped in a world where individuality is drowned beneath the weight of groupthink? How can so many be swept by tides of ignorance, fear, and unquestioning loyalty? Isn't it strange that we often call it common sense to follow the crowd, even when the crowd seems lost? Are we truly thinking beings, or just puppets pulled by the strings of social pressure and primal instincts? Picture the countless moments in your life when you agreed, nodded, or stayed silent, not because you believed, but because the cost of dissent seemed too high. The weight of judgment, the fear of rejection, the aching loneliness. Why does this silent compulsion hold such sway? What is the nature of this invisible force that leads us all into a herd mentality, this collective blindness that makes us forget our own eyes, our own reason? And yet, within this dark reality, there lies a terrifying question. If the herd leads us astray, if it confines us in a prison of foolishness, who then is truly free? Is freedom possible, or is it an illusion whispered by philosophers and dreamers? What if breaking away means losing not only community, but the very identity you thought was yours? If your beliefs, your values, your sense of self are shaped by this collective, then who are you without it? This is the paradox that grips us. The yearning for autonomy entangled with the need to belong. The desire to rise above the crowd shadowed by the fear of standing alone. It is a tension that twists deep inside, an existential crossroad that demands a choice. You feel the stirrings of rebellion, a flicker of hope and terror intertwined. But before you can act, before you can even fully understand, you must confront the roots of this enigma. Why does the human mind so readily surrender to the herd? What ancient forces, hidden beneath layers of consciousness, pull us into this vast, unconscious dance? What philosophical truths have the great thinkers uncovered about this human predicament, this trap of collective folly? And perhaps most haunting of all, what awaits on the other side of this awareness? Is breaking free merely a lonely exile, or could it be the first step toward a profound liberation? The answers are not simple, and the path is treacherous. But the journey begins with this unsettling realization. You are not just an individual. You are a being enmeshed in a web of social, psychological, and existential forces that shape who you are and how you think. So, will you remain part of the unthinking crowd, swept endlessly forward by a force you barely understand? Or will you dare to question, to rebel, to seek the hidden truth beneath the surface of collective madness? The choice is yours, but first, you must look deeper into the shadows of your mind. Only then can you glimpse the roots of this silent captivity and begin to imagine the possibility of escape. The mind is a labyrinth, and within it dwells a force so subtle, yet so insidious that it binds millions without chains or bars. This force is the hidden engine behind herd mentality, the psychological and philosophical roots that anchor us in collective delusion. To understand how we become prisoners of this invisible grip, we must peer beneath the surface of everyday thought, into the deep caverns of human nature. Carl Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, a vast reservoir of shared symbols, memories, and archetypes inherited across generations. It is here, in this shadowy realm, that the seeds of herd mentality take root. The crowd is not merely a gathering of individuals. It is a living organism, fueled by a primal need to belong. The individual psyche is drawn like a moth to the collective flame, often unaware that it is losing its own distinct light. This unconscious pull toward unity, while offering safety and identity, masks a perilous surrender of autonomy. Friedrich Nietzsche warned us of the herd instinct, the tendency of people to sacrifice creativity, will, and truth to conform with the masses. For Nietzsche, the herd is a force of mediocrity, choking the exceptional and the free spirit. The terrifying power of this force is its invisibility. It wears the mask of morality and reason, persuading us that to deviate is dangerous, selfish, or even evil. Underneath lies a brutal suppression of individuality disguised as virtue. Arthur Schopenhauer echoed this bleak vision, suggesting that human behavior is often driven by blind, irrational wills, perpetuating suffering through mimicry and unreflective obedience. The herd's voice drowns the whisper of introspection, replacing depth with surface noise. This is not just social pressure. It is a psychic contagion, a spreading virus of conformity that infects even the sharpest minds. Aldous Huxley, in his dystopian foresight, imagined societies anesthetized by distractions and conditioning, where true thought is sacrificed for the comfort of the many. The herd thrives on this sedation, on mass media, social expectations, and cultural narratives that simplify complexity into digestible dogmas. It creates a false consensus, a manufactured reality that feels natural because everyone believes it. Jean-Paul Sartre exposed the existential horror beneath this condition, the loss of authentic selfhood. When you surrender to the herd, you risk becoming a bad faith actor, living a life scripted by others, avoiding the terrifying freedom and responsibility of true choice. The weight of conformity is not just external, but deeply internal, a betrayal of one's own being. Viktor Frankl, through his crucible in the concentration camps, revealed another dimension. Even in the direst circumstances, freedom begins in the mind, the space between stimulus and response. Yet herd mentality constricts this space, replacing conscious choice with automatic reaction. It hijacks meaning itself, replacing personal purpose with collective slogans and simplified narratives. This hidden force operates like an invisible puppet master, pulling strings beneath your awareness. It shapes your fears, your hopes, your very identity, without ever asking permission. Its power is reinforced by evolutionary biology. Humans are wired to seek safety in numbers, to avoid ostracism at all costs. The psychological terror of isolation fuels a desperate allegiance to the group. Emotionally, this force manifests as anxiety, guilt, or shame when you entertain thoughts that deviate from the norm. It presses you to silence your doubts, to swallow your curiosity, to bury your dissent deep within. The price of freedom is fear, and the price of fear is submission. Philosophically, this mass conformity masks a profound existential crisis, the paradox of freedom and belonging. We long for connection, yet crave liberation. We seek certainty, yet face absurdity. The herd offers the illusion of certainty, the comfort of answers, even if those answers are false. But what if this force is not simply a social ill, but a fundamental part of human nature? What if the conflict between individuality and the collective is an eternal struggle, one that shapes every human life? What deeper truths lie buried in this tension, waiting to be unearthed? As you wrestle with these questions, you stand on the edge of a precipice. Understanding this hidden force is not merely an intellectual exercise. It is an emotional reckoning. It forces you to confront how much of your identity, your thoughts, and your beliefs have been shaped, not by you, but by the silent, unseen currents of the herd. The next step will expose the true cost of this surrender, the unseen consequences that ripple through your mind and the world. The cost is far greater than you may imagine, touching not only your actions, but your very reality. Beneath the surface of everyday life, the herd's grip quietly weaves a web so fine and pervasive that its victims scarcely notice its hold. This invisible thread stretches into every corner of your mind, silently shaping the reality you live in, your thoughts, emotions, and even your sense of self. The unseen consequences of herd mentality extend far beyond simple conformity. They twist the very fabric of personal and societal existence in ways both subtle and devastating. At the heart of this silent captivity lies a network of cognitive biases, mental shortcuts designed to ease the burden of decision-making but exploited by the herd to enforce uniformity. Take the bandwagon effect, the instinctive leap to join popular opinion, simply because it is popular. This bias transforms individuality into mimicry, making dissent a costly anomaly. Confirmation bias then fortifies these collective beliefs, filtering out any contradicting evidence until reality itself bends to the majority's narrative. Neurologically, the brain craves social approval as a primary reward. Dopamine, the chemical of pleasure, is released when we feel accepted, reinforcing patterns of conformity like a Pavlovian response. This creates a feedback loop where deviation triggers stress responses, activating the amygdala's fear circuits and warning us of social rejection as if it were a physical threat. Your brain literally hardwires you to follow the herd, to keep the peace at the cost of personal truth. But this wiring does not stop at individual psychology. It scales up to cultural conditioning. From birth, you are immersed in a sea of shared symbols, language, and values that preordain the boundaries of thought. The culture becomes an echo chamber, amplifying herd mentality across generations. You learn not just what to think, but how to categorize, judge, and respond. It's a silent curriculum teaching compliance over curiosity, obedience over originality. The societal consequences are dire. Herd mentality fuels polarization, tribalism, and the relentless escalation of us versus them. The herd's need for cohesion turns outsiders into enemies, stoking cycles of fear and violence. Social media, with its algorithms engineered to maximize engagement, becomes a petri dish for this dynamic, rewarding outrage and consensus over nuance and dialogue. What began as a survival mechanism devolves into a tool for mass manipulation. On a personal level, the consequences seep deeper. You may feel an unshakable numbness, a loss of vitality that masquerades as comfort. The cost of conformity is not only intellectual but existential, a slow erosion of your unique perspective, creativity, and authenticity. The vibrant colors of your inner world fade into the gray monotony of collective opinion. Imagine waking up one day and realizing your beliefs, your desires, your fears, were they ever truly yours? Or were they handed down, absorbed unconsciously from the crowd? This realization can trigger a crisis of identity, a profound loneliness that shakes the foundations of selfhood. The world you trusted to be your own suddenly feels alien, scripted by forces you never chose. And yet, this crisis is often suppressed by the very force that caused it. The herd whispers, "Stay silent. Stay safe." It offers the illusion of security in exchange for your voice. This trade-off creates an emotional tension, a cognitive dissonance, that festers beneath the surface, unresolved and corrosive. The silent tragedy is that the herd's influence blinds you to its very existence. You navigate life believing in your freedom while walking a narrow path carved by invisible hands. This unconscious surrender perpetuates cycles of ignorance, fear, and helplessness on a massive scale. But what if this silent trap could be shattered? What if you could wake from this mass hypnosis and reclaim the space between stimulus and response that Viktor Frankl called freedom? The breakthrough requires more than awareness. It demands a radical transformation of perspective, a rebellion against the invisible currents that have carried you thus far. You may already feel that stirring inside, the faint pulse of resistance, the spark of autonomy. But stepping into this rebellion is not easy. It challenges the deepest parts of your being and threatens the very foundation of your social world. Still, history whispers stories of those who dared to break free. Iconoclasts, revolutionaries, visionaries who refused the comfort of conformity. Their journeys illuminate a path not often spoken of, a path to reclaiming control, to rebuilding a self forged in the fire of conscious choice. The question now is, how do you join this lineage of rebels? How do you break the chains that bind your mind and step into the freedom that awaits beyond the herd? You stand at the edge of a precipice, a threshold between the comfortable darkness of the herd and the blinding, unsettling light of autonomy. To break free is not to simply reject the crowd, but to undergo a radical shift in perspective so profound it rewires your very being. First, you must recognize that the herd's power is an illusion sustained by your unconscious consent. The invisible chains tighten only when you acquiesce to fear, to the craving for approval, and to the seductive comfort of sameness. This realization cracks the mirror of false security and reveals that true freedom begins inside your mind, the space where you can choose not to follow, not to believe, not to comply. The rebellion is an act of courage. It starts with questioning the obvious, challenging the accepted narratives, and daring to feel the isolation that follows. It is a betrayal of the easy path, but a betrayal that is essential if you seek genuine liberation. Consider historical figures who shattered the herd's grip. Socrates, who chose death over silence. Galileo, who defied dogma to speak truth to power. Rosa Parks, who refused to relinquish her dignity in a system built on submission. Their power lay not in physical force, but in an unyielding refusal to surrender their inner freedom. They understood that to break the herd's spell is to reclaim your soul. But rebellion is not merely defiance. It is the construction of a new reality. It requires cultivating a mindset that embraces uncertainty, values critical thinking, and finds meaning beyond the crowd's shallow consensus. It means learning to sit with discomfort, to endure loneliness, and to confront the abyss of self-doubt without fleeing back into the herd. Practical steps emerge from this radical shift. Begin by observing your thoughts without judgment. Notice when they echo the crowd and when they arise from your own inquiry. Practice speaking your truth in small ways, even when it feels risky. Seek solitude, not as exile, but as a crucible for self-discovery. Surround yourself with those who encourage authentic dialogue, not mere agreement. Modern-day rebels emerge everywhere. Writers, artists, whistleblowers, thinkers, who refuse the anesthetizing pull of the herd and instead ignite sparks of awareness. Their rebellion often begins quietly, as an internal revolution of values and perceptions. At the heart of this rebellion lies a paradox. The more you break free, the more you realize you are connected, not to the herd, but to a deeper humanity that transcends the surface noise. True belonging is no longer about fitting in, but about standing authentically in the world. Imagine the feeling of waking up each day not as a passenger on the herd's train, but as the driver of your own destiny, steering through uncertainty with deliberate purpose. This reclaimed power infuses your choices with clarity and meaning. Yet, the path is fraught with challenges. You will face resistance, both external and internal. The herd will attempt to pull you back with ridicule, isolation, and fear. Your own doubts will whisper that freedom is too costly. But remember, the greatest act of rebellion is to choose freedom despite the cost. This rebellion is not a destination but a continuous journey, a daily commitment to live consciously and courageously. It is a revolution that begins within and radiates outward, transforming not only your life but the world you touch. Are you ready to take this step? To claim the power that has always been yours but long forgotten? To ignite the fire of rebellion that will illuminate the darkness of herd mentality? The final truth awaits, the revelation that will forever alter how you see yourself and the world. But first, you must cross this threshold. You have wandered through shadows long enough. Now, the ultimate truth reveals itself, not as a distant ideal or lofty philosophy, but as a piercing reality that reframes everything you thought you knew. Freedom is not the absence of the herd, it is the transcendence of it. This is not a mere physical escape, but a profound awakening to the nature of reality itself. The herd is a surface illusion, a projection of fears, insecurities, and the desperate human longing for certainty and safety. Yet beneath this veneer lies a deeper, unshakable truth. Your essence is not defined by conformity or rejection, but by the capacity to be present with your authentic self amid chaos. Imagine yourself as a vast ocean, with waves rising and falling. These waves are the thoughts, emotions, and social pressures that come and go. The herd is like a storm on the surface, violent and consuming. But the ocean's depths remain untouched, vast and serene. Your true self is this depth, infinite and undisturbed by the temporary turmoil above. This realization shatters the binary trap of belonging versus isolation. You see that true belonging is not a desperate grasp for approval, but a conscious choice to engage with the world from a place of centered being. You do not need the herd to validate your existence because you are anchored in a self that transcends the shifting sands of opinion and fear. Philosophically, this insight echoes the teachings of the great mystics and existentialists alike. Freedom arises not from external circumstances, but from the inner sovereignty of consciousness. Jean-Paul Sartre's notion of radical freedom, Viktor Frankl's will to meaning, and even Carl Jung's individuation converge here. Freedom is the courage to face the void and declare your own meaning. Yet this freedom is not without responsibility. It demands you confront the loneliness, the uncertainty, and the weight of choice. It calls you to live with integrity, to embrace paradox, and to walk your path without guarantee or apology. The world you see, the media noise, the social chaos, the herd's relentless march, is but a backdrop against which your true drama unfolds. By stepping into your authentic power, you transform this backdrop from a prison into a stage, a place where your unique voice can resonate and inspire. Poetically, this is the moment where the prisoner becomes the poet, where the silenced voice becomes a roar, and where the scattered fragments of self coalesce into wholeness. It is a rebirth, not of innocence, but of fierce clarity and fierce love for the truth. So, as you stand on this threshold, ask yourself, will you settle for the safety of the herd, forever trapped in a world of fools? Or will you dare to break free, embrace your profound solitude, and step into the radiant freedom of your own becoming? The choice is yours, and it is the most courageous act you will ever undertake.